Hello, beautiful ladies. Welcome to the Jen Marple Show. Today, I've got another gorgeous guest. Her name is Donna Coxon-McCory, and she is fabulous. And she is the founder of The Wiser Me, which is a community for midlife women. And I'm going to let her talk all about it. But it's this wonderful community that she has designed as a lifelong sort of community builder. When she popped her head up in midlife and looked around and realized there were no resources, there were no information, and nobody gathering. So she decided to be the one to put together a gorgeous community that is meant to support us during our third curve, which is her really cool take on midlife. And so she's going to go into all of that. Donna is also part of my Stepping into the Spotlight program, which is amazing because we are all learning every single day. And the reason why I do this podcast, that if we don't get out there and get seen and get our messages out there and be visible, we can't support all the beautiful women and people that we want to support. So Donna, thank you for having the courage to step into the spotlight. Thank you for having the courage to be on this podcast today. And also thank you for creating this beautiful community, of which she does a lot of local events here in Northern California, where we are both located. And so I don't forget to say it. She's having an event on February 5th. I will be speaking at it, which is fun, but we're going to have a nice group discussion about pivoting and what's there for us in midlife. So all that will be linked in the show notes, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But I wanted to make sure I said it right off the top. So if you are local, you can come join us. But get ready, everyone. We're going to have a gorgeous conversation today about the power of community and connection in midlife and how it is not a should, or maybe we think we should have it, but it's really, truly a must-have to thrive in all areas of life. So with all of that, Donna, welcome to the show. And I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you, Jen. It's been great going through your program and meeting you and the other lovely women in it and the support that everyone's been giving each other. I mean, we had our last meeting today, and I'm not one for stepping into the spotlight and being the face of things like this. So that was lovely to get all the rewarding and, encouragement.
I love that. And what we always talk about on the show, and we'll be talking about this if you come to the event on February 5th, if you are local, is that it takes a lot of courage to do these things. And so that's why I do this podcast, because I want you all to get one little bit of advice. I want you to know that if I can do it, you can do it. If Donna can do it, you can do it. All my guests, we share our truths. And I want you to feel this collective sort of hug and support, because all of you listening have beautiful missions and beautiful hearts. And I don't want you to stop yourself because of fear and judgment and all of that. We just have to throw all that crap to the curb. And we'll probably get into that a little bit today. But Donna, tell us your story, because you came up with this concept. I had asked her when she joined the program, because there's Wiser Than Me, which is the Julia Louis-Dreyfus podcast. And so that's where my mind went. But just so we're clear, it's the Wiser Me is her community. And she actually started the community before Julia started her podcast. But I love it because we are wise. We are wise, 40 plus, midlife and beyond. We've got all these decades behind us. We are very wise. But tell us, you've told me that you've been building communities forever and you saw a need and then you started the Wiser Me. So how did it all come to be?
Gosh, there is a story there. Let's see. So my story around wellness, if you will, women's wellness in midlife. And let me just say, so many people have said, what does midlife mean, Donna? You talk about midlife all the time. And it's literally, if you look it up, it's ages 40 to 60. So in midlife, we also have this thing called the menopause transition that happens, and it's where you just end up for a time, you're like, what's going on with me? I don't feel myself. You start seeing different health practitioners and you just suddenly feel really blah. And I went through that. And it was like sort of all this pre-pandemic stuff, trying to connect dots, and they weren't connecting. And fast forward to the pandemic and having lots of time on our hands, and we're all like scrolling, trying to figure out what's happening. What does our future look like? And just lots of time on our hands. And I started looking on YouTube a lot, and I came across this woman, this doctor. Her name's Barbara Taylor, and she was an OBGYN from Texas. She had put together this series of YouTube videos, about 20, 25 minutes in length. And it was basically an education for all women, a hormonal education, like what's going on in your body, both, your anatomy, your biology, from womanhood through to the whole menstrual arc and menopause and all that. There was so much in there I didn't know. And it was really, I was just like, wow, are we this complex? There were all these like little nuggets and tidbits of really amazing information and learning what your progesterone is, your estrogen, your testosterone. And it was just like, wow, finally, I understand what's been going on. Yes, hey, guess what? You're in perimenopause. And from there, I just started finding other great voices in the space, other women doctors. That's when I think I was introduced after that to Mary Claire Haver. And then I finally got on Instagram because, that wasn't kind of something that I enjoyed. But then it was like a flood of information and it was a mind expanding situation. From there, my son went off to college at the end of 2023. At that point, I knew the company I was working for was headed for a major reduction in force. They told us before the holidays. And, so we knew it was coming. And there was a lot of heartbreak and people just like feeling like they didn't know what was going to happen. But I was already kind of going, this might be really interesting. It might give me the space and time I need because I was feeling such overwhelm at the time. Being an empty nester, we were already talking about putting our house on the market that next summer. So there were just like all these things in my life swirling around. So our organization, our division sort of folded and I got a chance to take a deep breath because I had been in grind seriously for a long, long time. And I worked leading program management teams, leading big complex projects in the tech world. It was an opportunity. And so one day I was talking to a girlfriend and I used to do these walk and talks with my girlfriends, when we were finally allowed out the pandemic, these one-on-one conversations. And invariably we'd start talking about our health and I would tell them all this stuff I knew. So I was talking to a girlfriend and I'm like, I really feel like I should do something with this. And she's like, oh, well, why don't you? What's stopping you? And I'm like, actually nothing. And so then I started within 2 days, I started talking to my network of girlfriends locally. I got a place to hold these meetings that we decided to have. And it was more like creating a safe space for women to come together to connect and talk and really, really talk through the issues that they were having so they didn't feel like they were so alone, but also make it fun. Because if there's something I know how to do, it's to throw a good party. That's kind of like the beginnings of that. But from a community building perspective, I did one community in my 20s that was sort of a women's centric business networking thing. And then I was co-founder of 2 creative tech communities in San Francisco. One was San Francisco, one was called Converge SF. And then I sort of took that to the suburbs where we live, just outside San Francisco. I did a creative networking version there. And then life got busy. I'm like, I can't do this anymore. Too many other things going on. This is the thing I decided to do last year. I think it's the things I like to do really is connect people, see that magic happen when people meet and really seem to dig each other. I'm always kind of like the person behind the scenes. I like to make things happen. I like to see joy. And that was the very first video I posted to my Wiser Me Instagram was me coming off that first meeting, just like mind blown, going, oh my God, it was so cool to see these connections tonight. And the response I got from women in our community, like, oh, when's the next one? This was so great. And that made me feel good and encouraged me to keep going.
Well, I love it. I'm glad you had the courage and to listen to yourself. And I'm glad you had that one friend who said, why the hell aren't you doing it? What's stopping you? You're like, absolutely nothing. And it can be, y'all, just as simple as that. It's giving yourself permission or having a really good friend just saying, just give yourself permission and go for it. And you brought up something which I see a lot too, is that when women come together, it's always an incredible experience. I've never walked away with anything I've hosted or been a part of where new friendships haven't been made or women feel seen, they feel heard. Everyone's heard my story. I started doing events years and years ago, pre-pandemic, and I was already feeling like women were feeling disconnected and alone because women weren't typically having the avenues to have these deeper, richer conversations and could just peel back the layers, because it's all nice to be superficial. Oh, how's your kids doing? This and that. Where'd you get that cute purse? But especially now in midlife, which you call the third curve, and I want to go into your definition of that, we really need that support network in all areas of our lives. So what you're creating is amazing. And I'm honored to be speaking at one of your events coming up. But let's talk about the third curve, because that was something I'd never heard until I met you. I'd never heard midlife be defined as the third curve. So what is that? How did you come up with that term, and what does it mean?
For me, when I was coming off of that last job, I was listening to a lot of podcasts and audiobooks and just doing a lot of deep reflection, as you do. And one of the audiobooks I listened to is actually called From Strength to Strength. And it was by a writer called, and it's Albert Brooks. And he was a writer for The Atlantic, and he wrote this book. And he actually talked about it from his perspective, very much from a man's perspective, about the second curve of life. Is like your career, everything you've known in your career sort of stops and you take on a different role, like more of a mentorship role or just something different. You pivot, and how that's more of a positive thing, and just like how your spirituality is more prominent in your life. And so that kind of, I was thinking a lot about being in midlife, but I was kind of thinking through, I'm like, that doesn't like really resonate the same way for me. And then I've heard other people talk about the various phases of your life. And one day I just sort of thought to myself, well, I think right now going through midlife, there's at least we're in our third phase or third curve. And for me, the first curve is like, from childhood through to getting your formal education. And it's where you learn your societal norms. You sort of figure out who you are. You try things on, different identities, throw something against the wall, see, does it stick? Does that feel good for me? And then the second curve is more, you're super focused, super responsible. It's about careering. You are focused on that career. You're focused on maybe your marriage and your raising of children. And you're just on the treadmill and you're doing what you have to do. And there's not really a lot of time for you. I mean, there wasn't for me. Maybe some women have different stories, but when I think about how quickly that time went by, and I feel like I'm very proud of myself. I did a lot and I have an amazing son and my career was great. But then third curve is like things start kind of wobbling a bit. Maybe your child's older. They don't need you so much anymore. Maybe they've left for college like mine had. You're going through the beginnings of the menopause transition where you're not feeling quite right in your body anymore, and your health and wellness are a consideration. And also in your third curve, maybe you decide you want to try something else with your career because it doesn't sit quite right, or you've hit a plateau, or you're just ready for change, right? So this is kind of like you're reimagining your life in your third curve. Just because it's been a certain way and you've done things a certain way doesn't mean to say you have to continue doing things that way. And maybe your friendships have changed because you know what? When kids grow up and go away and you're in the home that you've been in, and you kind of like, well, do I need to be here anymore? So people move out of your community. At least this is, I can speak to what's happened around me. And then if you had kids who are no longer in the school system, sometimes your friendships change with the friends who still have kids in the school system because you just don't have as much overlap anymore in your interests. So I just think that there's a lot of space in your third curve to remix things. I don't often say it's like a big reinvention. It's maybe a rediscovery and a remixing of what's gone there and a reprioritization. So that's what being in the third curve means to me. And props to Albert Brooks. I will be so ashamed if I got his name wrong.
Somebody else on the show has mentioned that, or somebody in my world has mentioned From Strength to Strength or recommended that book. I think even third curve, and if you're kind of defining midlife 40 to 60, and I'm like at 55, I'm like, I don't know, I feel 35 or even 30 at this point, that there's a fourth curve and probably this fifth curve. I'll keep iterating, but what I love about it, and I feel the same way, is that there is something that happens, that there is a lot of life transitions. And of course, I'm right where you are with the first kid going off to college, just had a college meeting last night with my girls, and I just couldn't do anything more after that. I'm like, I just have to go watch mindless TV right now because I'm just processing really, truly like these girls leaving in a year and a half. And it's a lot. And I know, and I've said on the show before that there is so much upside to all of it, but I think we have to honor these big transitions and give ourselves that space to like grieve once. And it's like a happy, sad thing. That's the whole damn thing about the whole thing too, especially when it's with your kids. They're doing exactly what you want them to do.
Yeah.
And they're off. But for the sake of this conversation and talking about the power of community and connection, and you mentioned there are a lot of friend transitions that change. And I was talking to my husband about this, like our entire social life for 15 years or even more was as soon as those kids started preschool, it's birthday parties and it's sports and you're just thrown, and we have 3 kids. So then we're thrown together, soccer teams, basketball teams, this and that. And you don't really even have to think about it and you're not even questioning. And you probably have some college friends or other friends, but those friends for most of us, or that those people that were thrown together with the kids were our community, our network, the safety. They're the second people who to call in case of emergency. I felt this once the kids went to high school. Like, I don't really know the parents of a lot of their friends unless they were pre-existing. We'll go to a game or two, but it definitely starts to dissipate. And then you look around, you're like, oh, where's everybody? And then everyone's busy and everyone's doing the same thing. So you have to be really intentional about friendships and community. I found it to be extremely important. We've talked about the fact that we lose a lot of core people in our lives. And if we decide to work on our own or be on our own, we don't have those colleagues that we're talking about. Or maybe you're just working from home and you're missing even that. So just so much has changed. But I know for a lot of women, it's really hard to make new friends and find community. And there are women who listen to this all over the world, some who are not living in big cities or places where there's tons of programming where it's easier to find things. But even around here, because I talk to all the women here where there are things going on all the time, women still find it really hard and scary to put themselves out there to make new friends and find community. So what's your advice to all those women who are dying for community and craving connection? What can they do?
Well, I mean, it's all the small things, first of all, right? And I kind of just went through this in France because I didn't know anyone. But by the time I left, I made an effort to get to know people. And so it's really researching what is going on in your area, first of all. And there's various online ways to do that, right? You've got like Eventbrite and Meetup and paying attention to any community specific boards. I mean, I know here we've got Nextdoor as well. There's always things that you hear about. And then are they free? Are they low cost? Some of them, people are doing these events because they want to make money. So maybe that's out of your range of possibility, but even the small things. So I like to say, if you always go to the same cafe or restaurant, go somewhere else. Try other places because you never know when opportunity and serendipity is going to strike, and just look up once in a while. You go somewhere and then you end up on your phone or you look down because you're writing. So look around, give some eye contact, smile, ask a question. And even like the smallest things, you just never know. You never know when that small thing is going to open up into something unexpected. I'll be the first to say this has happened to me several times. Some of the jobs I've had in my life are just from like these one-off conversations, and it can change the trajectory of your life. But just even community, you just have to pay attention and you have to really, really want it. But it doesn't mean you have to go and pay to be a part of a community or a network. There's plenty of free stuff and opportunities around. It's all those small things, right? The firsts, I call them the firsts. And don't stop having those firsts. Look for them. Make them part of the way that you live your life.
Oh, I like that. Looking for firsts, because, and I've said it here on the show before too, where I'm perfectly happy to walk into a place where I don't know anyone. It's also being intentional, and that forces me to get to know people. Of course, it's in my nature and it's what I love to do. I just love talking to everybody. But if that's scary for you, just focus on one small conversation. It can be like you're saying, the cafe that you always go to, or if you are going to a yoga class, or you could go hear authors speak, because you're also aligning and convening around a shared topic that somebody's interested in. So if it's exercise or if it's the topic of the book or a pottery class, they're like walking clubs, there's running clubs. I remember we had a matchmaker come on years ago onto the podcast, and the advice she was giving for women to meet men later in life, it was the same thing about meeting friends, because it's getting out of your zone, working on yourself. If you live in the Bay Area and you're in one area, then go 2 towns over and go join a hiking club. We just have to think. And what you said too is just being intentional. It really has to be something you think about a lot. And once you have them, you have to tend to your friendships and your communities also. So you can't just put them on autopilot and think everyone's going to be everything to everyone. And you might feel like you need a group to help you with parenting. Maybe there's a group you need for work. So there's going to be something you need to join in that regard, or for midlife, like what you're building. So like the Wiser Me. So definitely if you're in the Bay Area, come to the event on February 5th, because I'll be there. Miss Want to Make Friends with Everybody will make you feel welcome. Don is going to make you feel welcome. And so just put yourself out there, because it's like with everything, right? We don't know unless we try. And I have to say this, is that if you go into a room or a situation thinking you're going to meet amazing people, you will.
Some of my closest friends are from those situations. Closest friends in my business life, but they're still close friends. I mean, it's how I met them. I took a class. I met a really good friend at a class. So for me, so I've got like these 4 foundational things that help me thrive. And one of them ties into this. It's like, be curious. Always be curious. And it can be the smallest things. And it's not like you have to spend a lot of time, but sit and think like, oh, what am I interested in? And go research it. One of the things I was doing in France is like all these new creation tools. I went into a creative flow, and I hadn't been able to be in a creative flow for a long time. So between the Wiser Me and picking up Canva and Instagram and all these other tools, I learned them, and it was fun for me. And the other thing is staying connected, which is another part that ties back into community. So that's my second thing that I need to thrive. The other thing is get outside. And so if you go to my Instagram account, you'll see I'm always having these walk and talks in nature with friends, or it's like me in my tennis shoes bopping around on a trail. And then the last one is find inspiration, whatever that means to you. And that inspiration can come from one of the other 3 items that I just talked about. And you could stack 2 to 3 of those and like have an uber inspiring moment. But for me personally, if I have these things in my life, I'm quite content, and it brings me happiness, and everything else kind of builds from there.
I love that. So let's do a recap of those. So you said there are like sort of 4 main tenets of how you live your life. And I'm assuming that's also the core foundational principles of the Wiser Me and the communities.
It's more personal, because for me, it's stay connected. That's the community part, because that helps you thrive and get inspiration. Second is be curious. If you've always wanted to do something, then do it. Then the other thing is get outside. Even if it's a walk around your neighborhood, just getting outside of your house, seeing nature, getting deep in nature. Just for me, that's so important. So important. And I didn't realize how important it was until pandemic days. And it grew from there. Being in touch with the universe, get outside. And then just finding inspiration. However, that isn't often, those come from the other 3.
I love that. Keeps us on our toes, keeps our minds going and fresh. And I love the getting outside. I have to remember, like today, I haven't been outside yet. So you're reminding me. Just sometimes if I start my day, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to get outside. And that, you remember, isn't it like the Japanese or something that actually write prescriptions? So go take a walk in the forest or go into nature.
I think so. And again, I think for me, like being in France, I was out on walks a lot and on trails and doing it on my own. And I think if you take out the AirPods, because I'd listen to audiobooks and podcasts and my playlists, but the moment you sort of take them out and listen to your breath, then you listen to your feet and the birds and the trees and the thoughts. I mean, I don't know. That's when a lot of my creative inspiration hits.
And we'll talk about that at your event, because part of that being with yourself and taking that time is to be quiet. Of course, we want you to listen to those podcasts, but when you're doing these exercises and trying to get in touch, you really have to get rid of all the inputs. Okay, I have a couple final questions for you.
Okay.
What do you think the best thing is about being in midlife?
It's the calm that I feel, because I know who I am. And talking about inputs, you stop taking those inputs from all those people. You realize that they just don't matter in the whole scheme of things anymore. And it's about knowing yourself and being okay with who you are. And I'm very okay with who I am right now.
That's amazing. Okay. So finally, everybody on the show completes this phrase. You're not too fucking old to.
You're not too old to reimagine or rediscover who you are in this point in your life. So we talk about pivots a lot, and I find pivot can be such a loaded term because it like has this idea of like, oh, you can go from here to here. But I think that I'm more in favor of this colorful remix and reprioritizations of all the things that help you to be you at this point in life and to help you thrive.
So in relation to the Wiser Me, it sounds so fabulous. So can you tell us a little bit more about it and why women should become part of this community?
Well, the Wiser Me is an in-person community and education platform, essentially, that celebrates a woman's third curve events, workshops, and online resources at thewiserme.org. And so what we try and do is we highlight connection, we highlight empowerment of women in midlife to thrive and imagine what's next for them. And so that, in a nutshell, is what it is. And we started in a grassroots way, and I want to empower other communities to do what we've done here.
Oh, I love that. This has been so fun. Quickly tell us about the events on February 5th, and we're going to link all that information in the show notes because this will run before that. If you're listening to this in real time, it will be a couple days away. So we want you to attend if you're local. So share that information, please.
Yes. So the Wiser Me generally meets at Vintage Ruse Boomerang Lounge, which is in Mill Valley, California. And on the 5th, we have this fabulous speaker named Jen Marples, who will be guiding us through 8 steps for midlife pivot. We'll have another event after that coming up. So you can find the Wiser Me Eventbrite. You can subscribe to our events there, or you can follow us on Instagram and learn about the events through Instagram. And then we have a website too, which is thewiserme.org. And Instagram is thewiser.me. And yeah, we'll just see how the experiment grows, because this started out just as an experiment and got in a creative flow.
They all start out as experiments, and then you get more information, and that's just how everything we do in life is, right? So I'm glad you went for it. And again, it's Wednesday, February 5th. Yeah. And I'm going to link all the information in the show notes, how to find Donna, how to register for the event if you're local. But it's been so fun chatting with you, and I look forward to being with your community, IRL. And I hope a lot of you listeners come out and join us. It will be a nice way. It's like right before Valentine's Day. So it's like little Galentines, little women getting together, having some lovely conversation, support, wisdom of everyone in the audience. I'll just simply be a guide, and we'll have a nice, rich conversation, a lot of fun mixing and mingling. So I hope to see all of you there. Donna, thanks for being here today. And I look forward to seeing you really soon.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jen.